Hey everybody, Chris here from chrisamericos.com, where we help you level up and show the world the best version of yourself. Today I'm going to tell you how to pronounce this word, but different native speakers might pronounce it differently, and that's what makes this a challenge. What is a bias? A bias is something that you believe that is not completely objective. So for example, someone can ask me, who is a better singer, John, Kevin, or Connor? Well, Connor is my brother, so I'm going to say Connor because I have a bias. And now Kevin and John can say, hey, that's not fair. He has a bias. That's his brother. Or they can say, that's not fair. He's biased. That's his brother. So we can say to be biased, or we can say to have a bias. We can also say to have a bias against something or against someone. For example, we can say, John is biased against Chinese people. When we say that someone is biased against something, it means that they don't like it or they probably won't choose that thing. But we can also say that someone is biased towards something, and this means that they like it and they will probably choose it. It's also important for me to remind you that some native speakers might say toward and some might say towards. So you could be biased toward someone and you could also be biased towards someone. And those are the same thing. The opposite of being biased is being objective. Objective means that you consider all of the points or options fairly. But if you're biased, then something or someone has influenced you, and now you can't make a fair decision. We might also talk about social problems using the word bias. For example, racial bias talks about unfair ideas or beliefs that people have about races. There's also gender bias, unfair beliefs that people have about men or about women. And the word bias is singular. We pronounce it bias. But how do you pronounce the plural form? You see, some people pronounce this word ɓaɪəsɪz with the is sound at the end. And other people pronounce this word ɓaɪəsiz with the ease sound at the end. And today I'm going to show you small video clips of different native speakers pronouncing this word differently.
Screw that. Like, I'm not going to let people's biases, inhibit really good work. And I actually, when I'm working with other people, I think a lot of new and interesting things kind of come out of that.
Is that all of us have our own political biases, which affect our view of the world.
As cops, we're human beings who bring all of our biases to the job.
Except that some of these biases are lurking inside of our heads.
Profit off of segmenting us and feeding us personalized content that both validates and exploits our biases.
What if we could unlearn the biases that we have towards people in poverty?
How are they thinking? How is their brain wired? What biases are they most susceptible to? Where are their receptors?
Whereas fake news is like, it makes you feel all kind of, I've always been right about everything, and this completely confirms all my biases. And
to understand another person is to understand the biases and assumptions that give rise to their behavior.
The author isn't trying to hide what their biases are. They're telling the reader.
Then we can start to become confident that they're not imposing their own cultural biases on the drawings.
But how do you know what's correct? Well, if you look online and you go to dictionaries, it says that ɓaɪəsɪz is the correct pronunciation. And I personally say ɓaɪəsɪz, but I've heard people say ɓbaɪɛsɪz. So to help you understand how to pronounce this word correctly, I decided to explain why some people pronounce it ɓbaɪɛsɪz and why it's correct to say ɓbaɪɛsɪz. It's the difference between is and ease. So a short sound and a long sound. Now, some teachers might tell you that there's only one right way to do something. Sometimes that's true, but with languages, that's rarely true. And just because someone does it a little differently or not the standard way, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a mistake. In this video, I'm telling you that the correct pronunciation is ɓbaɪɛsɪz, but some people say ɓbaɪɛsɪz, and that's okay. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's a mistake, but if there were a test following the standard rules of English, then it would probably be considered a mistake. The goal of everyday communication is to understand and to be understood. So it doesn't really matter if you say one or the other when you're talking to someone as long as they understand you. However, there is a reason why some native speakers might make this mistake, and pronounce it ʻbaɪəsɪz instead of ʻbaɪəsiz. Let's watch some examples of native speakers in professional situations pronouncing this word ʻbaɪəsɪz with the long ease sound at the end.
We all have our biases.
Especially stressful situations in which our biases and threat responses go wild in our mind.
Those people are all fallible. They're tired, they're hungry, they have biases.
Why are some people, sometimes at least, able to cut through their own prejudices and biases and motivations and just try to see the facts and the evidence as objectively as they can?
A lot of these things might have a basis in your implicit biases or things that you've heard, portrayals you've seen on television. And so when people are doing something like conducting a voice interview, often the implicit biases they have about voice can influence the decisions that they're making.
So is it a mistake that they pronounce it this way? Dictionaries and other resources tell us that this is not the right way to pronounce the word. It should be ʻbaɪəsɪz. So why do they pronounce it like that? Well, there's a category of words in English that came from Greek that end with ʻbaɪəsɪz. And in English, this ending usually sounds like ʻbaɪəsɪz. And those words are singular. They describe one thing, one action, one concept. But they can also have a plural form. And their plural form sounds like ʻbaɪəsiz, not ʻbaɪəsɪz, but ʻbaɪəsiz. For example, the word hypothesis. It has the ʻbaɪəsɪz ending, and if we want to make it plural, it becomes hypotheses with the long ease sound at the end. Another example of this is the word nemesis, which means enemy. And if we want to say more than one nemesis, then it's nemesis. Or when you're writing something in English, you might use parentheses. Another example is the word synthesis. You can have one synthesis and you can have two syntheses. And when you're finishing your degree at your university, you might have to do a thesis. One thesis, two theses. With those words, the plural sounds like ease. And probably the speakers of these videos believe that the pronunciation of the word ʻbaɪəsɪz is supposed to be ʻbaɪəsiz because of how these other Greek words change. Parentheses, nemesis, genesis, why not ʻbaɪəsɪz? But ʻbaɪəsiz is a member of a different category of words. The singular form is bias, and we have a pronunciation rule that tells us when a singular word ends with the s sound, the plural ending should sound like is. For example, one kiss, two kisses, one horse, two horses, one dress, two dresses, one bias, two biases. And the word biases isn't the only word that native speakers sometimes mispronounce because they think that it's part of the category of ʻbaɪəsɪz ending words. Another word that is commonly pronounced in different ways, or you might say mispronounced by native speakers, is the word processes. Again, the singular form is process, and we need to add is at the end, so it's processes. In British English, speakers usually say processes, but some American English speakers might pronounce it processes or processes. I don't pronounce it that way, and to me, it doesn't sound right, but some native speakers pronounce it this way too. Again, if we were taking an exam, then it would probably be wrong, but because real life is not an exam, it probably doesn't matter. So what's the correct pronunciation of this word? I think it's ʻbaɪəsɪz, but I'm going to let you decide for yourself. Write a comment down below and let me know what you think the right answer is. And while you're down there, don't forget to press like, press subscribe, click that bell button so you get notified every time a new video comes out, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.